Park, located in Rust, Germany, is often considered to be one of the best theme parks in the world. My channel focuses heavily on Disney and Universal, but I do like to expose my audience to other theme parks and attractions as well. I've previously covered Efteling in the Netherlands, which really sets the standard for fantasy theming and is unrivaled in this aspect, even by Disney. I've also covered the ever-evolving Phantasialand of Germany as well, sharing my thoughts on how exceptional the general theming of the park's respective lands and attractions are. As an American living in Central Florida, I've come to realize that European theme parks often deliver an experience that feels much more interesting and intimate than what their American counterparts can offer. Disney and Universal are great, and while I would be interested in visiting Disneyland Paris, these other parks are more appealing to me in that they don't feel like hyper-corporate products that exist to promote their media divisions. That brings us to what I now consider the last of the big three, Europa Park, often labeled as the Disneyland of Germany because of how heavily inspired it was by both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. To be straightforward, Europe has quite the nice assortment of theme parks, but Efteling, Phantasialand, and Europa Park seem to be the strongest and most prominent, at least from where I'm sitting, which is why I consider them an unofficial trio that exemplify the best of European theme park design. I would like to acknowledge that I know a significant part of my audience resides throughout Europe, so if that's you, I'm sure you're quite familiar with what I'm about to cover. However, what I'm hoping to do here is illuminate the theming and larger attractions that the park offers, revealing to my American audience what is often missing from parks throughout the United States. It's a place that I'm very set on visiting, and so today I would like to really discover and showcase what I like most about it, really revealing its exceptional design and experiences, provoking a larger discussion on what makes for compelling theme parks. Europa Park is huge, offering an overwhelming lineup of rides, shows, themed areas, and dining. It's difficult to know where to even begin, so I won't be covering everything, but I will try to provide a general overview and my thoughts on the design choices. Providing a bit of historic context, in 1972, Franz Mack of Mack Rides visited the United States with his son and was inspired to create a theme park of his own that would allow him to showcase the rides produced by the company. Europa Park would open in 1975, quickly expanding with a variety of themed areas, most of which were centered around different European countries, offering a wide variety of roller coasters, flat rides, and dark rides. While the park was intended to showcase the creations of Mack Rides, it does feature a number of other attractions from other manufacturers as well. So, looking at the park today, where do I even begin? Well, the park is just dripping with detail and interesting design choices no matter where you look, so I suppose we'll start there. When walking into the park, the first themed land you'll encounter is Germany, working as the park's main street and showcasing renditions of traditional German architecture found throughout the country's 16 provinces. The area also expands beyond the central street, including a number of smaller attractions, as well as the historic Balthasar Castle, which was built in 1442 and has a restaurant inside. The rest of the park's themed areas consist mostly of other European countries, including England, France, Greece, the Netherlands, Ireland, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Austria, Portugal, Russia, Switzerland, Scandinavia, and Spain. Still, it doesn't stop there. The park also includes the exotic Adventureland, as well as an area known as the Minimoys Kingdom, based on a French animated film franchise for children. Finally, in the tradition of many European theme parks, the Grimm's Fairy Tale Forest is a series of scenes and displays that portray popular stories from the Brothers Grimm. I'm not going to cover any of these lands in depth, as there are so many, but it's worth pointing out how the park is designed. Consensus, at least from many anecdotes I've read, seemed to be that the park's layout is often confusing, but absolutely packed with detail and hidden attractions. That's a really fantastic difference from most American parks, most of which are designed with large pathways meant to accommodate massive crowds of guests. Europa Park is a place to be discovered, with the transitions between the lands so often seamless that it seems easy to not even realize when you left one and entered another. Another thought I've often heard is that there are attractions pretty much everywhere you look. The big coasters definitely stand out among the landscape, but there are a ton of smaller attractions hidden around. If you've watched my videos, you know I'm not the biggest fan of flat rides because they often seem like cheap additions meant to soak up capacity. However, European theme parks have definitely shown me that I'm wrong, using these attractions to create kinetic energy for highly themed and well-landscaped areas, working as a great complement to really tie a space together. This also extends to smaller tracked rides as well, such as Jim Button Journey Through Tomorrowland, a small children-oriented attraction in the Germany section of the park. Riding on a small train, this attraction takes visitors through a series of scenes that you would never even know were there unless you made the conscious decision to ride it. If this type of ride system was in the United States, I probably would have written it off as a children's ride that wasn't really worth my time, because there's a strong chance it wouldn't be themed or have scenes like this. Yet, with Europa Park, when I finally do visit, I would be afraid to not ride any of the attractions because you never know what you might miss. The big coasters and ambitious dark rides are certainly appealing, but it's the small, almost unnecessary level of detail in the less marketable attractions that is most impressive to me. Another example is the Old MacDonald's Tractor Fun, located in the Ireland area. As a small ride that allows kids to drive a vehicle, in this case a tractor, it just blows me away how much landscaping and theming goes into it. If we were to choose an American counterpart, say the Tomorrowland Speedway at the Magic Kingdom, with open grass fields and not a single element of theming to be found, it really reveals how Europa Park is just on another level. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. Why do you have to compare this to Disney and not just showcase the park on its own merits? Well, as stated earlier, Europa Park is often called the Disneyland of Germany, and many of its attractions are quite heavily inspired by experiences in the Disney parks. The comparisons are simply inevitable. With that said, it's a great segue into the many interesting dark rides offered there. If you made it this far into the video, that means you're probably interested in what I have to say. If you could just do me a quick favor and hit the like button, I would appreciate it. In the France area of the park, you'll notice a very distinct building that should look incredibly familiar to you. Built in 1989 and clearly inspired by Epcot's Spaceship Earth, this building will host Eurosat, the park's indoor coaster, also working as their version of Space Mountain. Why did it have a space theme in France? Well, I'm not quite sure, but the attraction would close in 2017, reopening a year later completely retracked, and now sporting a Moulin Rouge theme, now known as Eurosat Can-Can Coaster. While definitely not a French film, at least the theming is based in France, making it thematically appropriate. I would like to make the observation from this that Europa Park really seems to know how to honor its legacy, updating its attractions but keeping the fundamental experience intact. Adjacent to Eurosat was an older dark ride titled Universe of Energy. Having opened in 1994, it was clearly inspired by the Epcot attraction of the same name, taking riders back in time to encounter dinosaurs. The consensus that I can seem to find online is that this attraction was rather boring, yet I've heard much of the same for the Epcot version, which I strongly disagree with, so who really knows. Regardless, this attraction would close in 2017 and reopened in 2018 as Lady Freudenreich's Curiosities. Visitors will encounter the eccentric curio shop owner, and will then board ride vehicles, taking them down into her former cellar which has now been turned into a dinosaur breeding farm. This attraction, generally regarded as an improvement by recycling the animatronics but recontextualizing them into this bizarre, humorous world, is a great example of updating an attraction but keeping its legacy intact. There's something about slower moving animatronics in real practical sets that just have a certain charm and evoke a specific type of atmosphere. I'm glad that Europa Park understands this, knowing how to keep the ride feeling special and updating it in a way that makes sense. That's an issue I have with Disney and Universal, blowing their budgets on these hyperfluid figures, but not understanding that one novelty animatronic isn't enough to replace fully fleshed out scenes. Speaking of updating attractions, the park's most impressive dark ride is easily Pirates in Batavia. Clearly inspired by Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, this ambitious attraction located in the Netherlands area puts riders right into a pirate raid on, well, Batavia. Historically one of Indonesia's largest cities under the colonization of the Dutch, the Batavia setting helps this attraction stand out quite a bit from the one it's inspired by. I wouldn't label Europa Park's dark rides as derivative of Disney, but they were clearly inspired by them, choosing their own unique interpretations. It's worth noting that Pirates of Batavia opened in 1987, but due to a fire, burned down in 2018. In less than 2 years, Europa Park completely rebuilt the attraction, updating its scenes and incorporating new effects, while still using low-level animatronics and heavily populating the ride. Now, were they forced to do so because of the fire? Of course, but I'm sure that an update would have come regardless. It does make me wonder though, if Pirates of the Caribbean burned down at Disneyland or the Magic Kingdom, would Disney leadership even bother rebuilding it? To finish off this segment of Disney-inspired dark rides, the Italy area contains a ride known as the Ghost Castle or Geisterschloss. Clearly inspired by Disney's Haunted Mansion, but much darker in tone, Ghost Castle is an omnimover attraction that takes riders through an Italian castle depicting horrific events. If there is a story, I can't really seem to discern what it might be, but I'm sure that someone in the comments knows a lot more than I do. To my knowledge, the attraction has changed quite a bit since its debut in 1982, adding cheap jump scares as well as cartoony characters from an in-park musical. Other additions include figures from the failed German children's monster film, Happy Family, contrasting with what I believe is the incorporation of a made-for-TV Jack the Ripper movie from 2016. I'm certainly interested in experiencing this attraction, but you can visually see that it's quite the mess. From accounts that I've read, the original ride was once less visually overwhelming and more thematically cohesive, relying more on atmosphere and not cheap intellectual property tie-ins. If I had to guess, I would assume that this is the next dark ride in the park to receive a major refurbishment and update. Still, I would like to make the observation that European theme parks generally shy away from corporate sponsors or IP tie-ins. While much of Europa Park is mostly original stuff, the weird incorporation of IP isn't unique to just Ghost Castle. While of course the park is mostly filled with attractions built by mock rides, its large steel hypercoaster called Silver Star was built by B&M in 2002. It looks like a pretty fantastic coaster, but strangely enough, lacks a lot of the theming that the rest of the park offers, kind of tucked away into its own corner of France. On the topic of intellectual property tie-ins, the attraction is sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. Considering the rest of the park, everything about this is kind of strange to me as an outsider, but because it's kind of hidden away and the coaster's layout brings it to the parking lot instead of in the park, it manages to not really disrupt anything. The other major IP tie-in is the Minimoys Kingdom, which, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is based on a French children's film franchise known as Arthur and the Minimoys. The Minimoys, as far as I can determine, are some sort of small, gnome-like creatures. The mostly indoor area of the Minimoys Kingdom shrinks you down to their size, offering a remarkably well-detailed space with some flat rides, a children's play area, and one of the park's signature attractions, Arthur the Ride. As a family-friendly powered coaster, Arthur brings riders through various scenes from what I assume are from the films, moving through the building and acting as a dark ride. Later, the coaster speeds up, bringing riders outside into a more thrilling portion before then re-entering the building for a few more scenes and returning back to the station. As someone who knows nothing about the films, the scenes of Arthur look remarkably well put together, even if I don't understand what's happening, which I think is a testament to how well the attraction was designed. The rest of the indoor space is also interesting and kinetic, spending a lot more effort on theming than was really needed. As an example, you can see that instead of just painting the walls, they use fencing and oversized plants to cover up the flat nature of an indoor show building. The park didn't need to do this, but it really shows you how dedicated they are to many of their experiences, even when trivial details could understandably be overlooked in other parks. Does this mean that every area has this level of theming? Well, certainly not, as many of the larger coasters can't be themed to this extent. However, they do go a lot farther than you would probably anticipate with their highly atmospheric cues, such as with the park's wooden coaster, Woden. Themed to Vikings and located in the Iceland section of the park, Woden was manufactured by Great Coasters International, and is the park's only wooden coaster. Nearby in the same area, Blue Fire is the prototype for Mack's launched steel coasters, and is another highlight of the park. Part of what makes it stand out is not just the themed queue, but the dark ride scenes before the launch. There appears to be a story of a hidden lab where energy is being harvested, featuring animatronic scientists and some quick show scenes. However, something goes wrong. Alarms blare throughout the facility, and the coaster is launched into its course. To finish off the park's big coasters, we're going to take a quick look at its two water coaster offerings. In the Greece section of the park, you can find Poseidon. While not as heavily themed as many of the other attractions, the station is atmospheric, and there is some interesting outdoor portions. If this looks familiar to you, it's likely because this is the same ride system as Journey to Atlantis at both SeaWorld Orlando and San Diego. While not nearly as heavily themed as the Orlando version, Poseidon as a water coaster makes up for it with more actual coaster track. Its counterpart is another but somewhat different model of the water coaster in the Portugal section of the park. Essentially just a shoot-the-chutes type of attraction, Atlantica Super Splash is technically a water coaster, but uses larger boats like a more traditional splashdown. Since I mentioned the others, I believe that the Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld San Antonio is a clone of this. I'm not a huge fan of water rides, but I did feel that these were worth mentioning. Having now covered the park's larger coasters and more prominent dark rides, I would like to transition to the many smaller experiences offered. I feel that this is incredibly important in well-balanced theme park design, as it really helps to disperse park crowds. When the care is taken to really elevate these experiences as Europa Park does, they can also be just as fulfilling as the e-tickets, but in a different way. Starting off with one of the park's other dark rides, Sleigh Ride Snowflake is a small attraction located in the Russia area of the park. Having been built in 1998, you can clearly see some dated elements, and it's on a much smaller scale than many of the other dark rides offered in the park. Even so, there's something about the cheaper but still well executed dark rides that have a certain charm to them that I really like. Also located in the Russia area is the mock prototype of their spinning coaster. Known as Euromir, this is generally regarded as one of the weaker coaster experiences in the park, but it is certainly interesting. Winding around these towers, The coaster is themed to the Soviet space program, with the towers arranged in such a way as to represent the Mir Soviet space station with its shape. From what I understand, the spinning motion of the ride vehicles is meant to convey spinning in space. As discussed earlier, Europa Park's attractions often have theming in areas that you wouldn't normally expect. In Iceland, a splash battle ride titled Whale Adventures contains interactive elements if you happen to shoot targets with water. Towards the end, there is even a small dark ride scene as well. Again, if this was in any other park, I wouldn't have expected any theming, and it makes me want to ride absolutely everything. Another example of an otherwise standard ride made interesting is the small Wild Mouse coaster in the Switzerland area. Known as Matterhorn Blitz, the ride starts with an elevator lift and takes riders down and around the lift to a pretty substantial drop. As a Wild Mouse, it still focuses pretty heavily on the tight turns and strong lateral G-forces, but its unconventional layout and light theming makes it interesting and special. Running over to Italy, there is a small dark ride called Piccolo Mondo, which translates to Small World. Despite the similarity in name to the Disney attractions, there doesn't appear to be any direct inspiration, as this little dark ride seems to focus on Italian history. It does so in a cartoonish way, using animals in place of people, and taking riders through scenes depicting Italian culture. It's weird, but that's part of its charm, I think. The park also contains both a log flume and powered coaster, both moving through a gem-filled cave. The problem with covering Europa Park is that it's just simply too big. No matter where you go, there are attractions, many large, but many small as well, each doing something unique that allows them to stand out. Very few parks compel me to want to queue up for smaller tracked or even flat rides, but Europa Park is a great example of how to make every single addition feel important to its respective space. At Europa Park, there is so much to see and so much to do that I could not possibly cover it all. There are also an astounding number of dining locations, with some of them being quite unique. For example, Food Loop is located in Luxembourg, using a rail system to deliver your order to your table. In the Netherlands, Bamboo Bay is an Indonesian-themed restaurant that has seating alongside the Pirates of Batavia ride, clearly inspired by Disneyland's Blue Bayou. The park offers a number of transport options that bring you on boats around lakes, a scenic train ride throughout the different areas, and a monorail up in the air that also takes you to some of their on-site themed resorts. I haven't even touched on Rulantica, their highly themed and unique water park that opened in late 2019. Europa Park is an exceptional example of theme park design done right. It's certainly not without its issues or less interesting offerings, but there's so much done so well that the problems are easy to overlook. To tie things up, I think that the park offers a variety of interesting lessons. The often small pathways and intimate details makes for a nice change of pace. It's a place designed to be explored and discovered, and not just to funnel massive crowds of people from shop to shop, ride to ride. It's a place where if you didn't ride the smaller attractions, you would miss show scenes and animatronics, revealing a dedication to ensuring that even the smaller experiences are truly worth your time. That's something often missing from American theme parks, concerned mostly with expensive e-tickets that fail to address capacity issues. A flat ride is not just simply a flat ride here, instead tying an area together with its kinetic motion, but is itself an experience due to the surrounding theming and unique elements often employed. Europa Park is what I consider to be a well-balanced park, offering attractions that range from children to families to thrill seekers. Its dark rides are plentiful, and its coasters offering surprising theming elements that are rarely found elsewhere. As with most European theme parks that I research and discover, it makes me realize how truly spectacular theme park design can be when the experience takes precedence over media synergy. I will always like Disney and Universal, but they really could take lessons from a place like Europa Park. Its offerings are overwhelming, but that's ultimately a good thing. Not every attraction has to be an ambitious and expensive e-ticket, and the park's lanes don't need to be optimized for crowd flow in every single area. Europa Park is huge, but manages to often feel intimate, packing in smaller attractions and details that always leave an impact. These are significant factors that allow European theme parks to stand out to me, and I think that these are lessons American parks could learn going forward. If you enjoy videos like these, I would like to once again ask to just leave a like, as it really helps boost the video into the YouTube algorithm. As always, if you want to be notified when I release new theme park video essays, I strongly recommend hitting the subscribe button with bell notification as well.